In this video, we will be exploring how to create Shopify checkout UI extensions, which are a recent addition to the Shopify platform and will allow us to build custom functionality that merchants can install at specific points in the checkout flow, with the advantage that they will maintain a cohesive look with the rest of the checkout elements and any modifications that the merchant has done to that page. Just a few disclaimers before getting started. At the time of recording this video, checkout UI extensions are only available for Shopify Plus customers. And also, you will need to have a checkout extensibility enabled on your store for this to work. So if your store is currently using checkout with Liquid, you'll need to take a look at the upgrade guide for that. I'll leave a link to that in the description. So with that out of the way, let's start a Shopify app project with npm init Shopify app latest. Let's call this my checkout extension. And let's start by adding your first extension. This will download and install the dependencies for the extensions template, which is the one that we will be using here. We don't need to worry about creating a full app for this to work. Also, if you already had an app, you can, of course, add an extension to an already existing app. We will see how to do that once this finishes installing. Okay, so this finished installing, and now I'm going to open this folder that it created, and I'm going to take all these files out of here, delete this, put it in the root, and now I'm going to run npm run Shopify app generate extension. So even if you had already an app created, you can run this command and you will be able to add the checkout UI extension that we will be doing in this video. So in my case, I'm going to create this as a new app. I'm going to call this checkout extension 1. I'm going to select in here checkout UI. And I'm going to select here TypeScript with React. So feel free to select whichever one of these options you feel more comfortable with. Now let's wait for the dependencies to install, and I'll be back in a second. Okay, so this finished installing, and now let's open this extensions folder and let's see what we have. In this src folder, the checkout.tsx, here, this is what controls what is being rendered in the UI. And also over here in Shopify.extension.toml, this is the configuration for our checkout UI extension. So for instance, here you can see that we have API access. This is the target of where this extension will be rendered. This over here should match with this. We will take a deeper look at that in a moment. Some other interesting configurations are here network access. For instance, if you had an external API you need to talk to while rendering your extension, you will need to have this set to true. I'll have to comment that because that won't be the case for this example. If you needed to access meta fields, this is where you will set up which ones you need access to. And also, if you wanted to let the merchant configure some elements of the extension, you will have to create settings such as this one, that is a single line text field that will let the merchant select the title for the banner. We will take a deeper look at that in a moment. So now let's run npm from that, and let's see how this extension looks like. It will ask me where I want to install this. I'll check this store, and now I'll press P to see a preview of this. So I will click on this, and this is my preview link that shows how my extension looks like. So the text that it is showing is what is in here. So if I were to change this for hello world, you can see that it holds reloaded, and I see here hello world. Previously, it had this translate function. You will have to use this if you were to distribute your checkout extension in the Shopify App Store, for instance, because merchants with different languages enabled will install your store. But for this example, I'm just going to put the text as is, just for simplicity. So I'll keep hello world in here. And now let's look over a limitation that checkout extensions have. And instead, if I wanted to just render plain HTML, such as this hello world in between p tags, you will see that nothing is being rendered. And the reasoning behind this is that if we wanted to render anything in the UI, we will have to use the different components coming from this checkout library that Shopify gives us. The reasoning behind this is that they want to keep the UI for this cohesive. So by using these elements, they ensure that we do that. You can take a deeper look at which elements we have access to. Over here, I will leave this link in the description, but these are all basically React components. So if I wanted to just render a text that said hello world, I will use this text component. Let's do just that. So I'll import text. And over here, I will replace this banner with a text that says hello world. And now if I go here, you can see that my hello world text is being rendered as expected. Now let's take a look at how to create a little extension to showcase some of the features that these have available. Okay, so the extension that we are going to be building is one that will allow the merchant to surface a product in the checkout and will allow the customer to directly add it to the cart from within there. This could be the base for something like complete the collection or complete the set, or this product goes well with this other product, or perhaps to showcase new products that have been added to the store. So it has quite a bit of flexibility. Now, the first step that we need to do is first, let's see what we have in the extension. Here you can see that my extension currently is this hello world text, and it is being rendered here above this form. However, I think it would make much more sense if we rendered it maybe below the product that is currently in the cart. So let's do that. Here we have a list of the extension targets, and you can see where each one of them renders content. Now, the one that we care about is here in order summary. And I think it will be this one, this purchase, the checkout cart line list render after. Now, you may see that some of them are blue and some of them are red. The ones that are red are static, which means is that the merchant doesn't have access to reordering them or putting them in a different place. And the ones that are in blue do allow for that. So you can see that this one, and this one all share the same name. So if you created an extension that has this placement, this target, the merchant will be able to select whether they want to put it here or here or here. Meanwhile, if we created one that has this name, the merchant doesn't have an option to put it somewhere else. They either enable it and it will show in here, or disable it and it won't show at all. So I think that the one that we will be using is this one. So let's go to VS Code and let's replace this with purchase. I think it auto-completed the wrong one. Checkout cart line list, render after. Checkout. Yes, this one. I think it is. And now, recall from a moment ago that I said that we needed to update this too. Going to do just that. You can see that if I don't refresh, like I have to shut down this and open it again, you can see that nothing is being rendered here because it has the previous version of my extension configuration where this hasn't been changed. Okay, I had a typo in here, but still that didn't affect it. Now, let's shut this down. Let's run npm run dev again. Let's open the preview one more time. Let's click on this. And you can see here that my hello world is being rendered now over here, which is awesome. Okay. Now, let's get the data that we care about. So let's have here this variant ID. The reason we are using a variant ID instead of a product ID is because in the settings for the checkout extensions, we are only allowed to let the merchant select variants, not products themselves. And when they select the variant, we get in the code the variant ID. For the time being, I'm going to just have a hard-coded variant ID over here. And then once we deploy this extension later in the video, we're going to see how to make that dynamic so the merchant can select whichever variant that they want. So let's have this like this, Shopify product variant. And here we are going to find a variant ID for our store. So over here, I'm going to find a product with variants, such as this one. And then I'm going to select this one over here, and I'm going to grab this ID from the URL and paste it over here. Now I'm going to get rid of this translate. I'm going to get rid of one or two. And let's get query, which will allow us to query the GraphQL API. And let's grab use effect and use state. So I'm going to have state of variant data and set variant data. Let's set it initially to null. This will be either null or the variant itself. I set this to any. We will change this for a type that makes much more sense in a moment. Now let's have an effect, a use effect in here that will run as soon as this component renders. And let's have an async function get variant data. Let's call it over here. Now let's have over here query result equals and we are going to use the node query over here because there isn't a direct query for a product variant. So here we are going to place the variant ID. And then we are going to have a GraphQL fragment for on product variants. So what this query is doing is that it is basically getting us any element with this ID. We know that this is a product variant because here this ID has a product variant, but this could also be a product or a collection or something else. Hence why we have to have this fragment over here to get the data that we need from GraphQL. So I'm going to get the title of the variant, the price of it, and let's see if this is working as expected. So I'm just going to log the query result in the console, and let's see what we have. So if I go here, if I open this console over here, you can see that I'm getting this data, and let's see if this is accurate. We'll put this over here. The price is accurate, and this is the ice one, and this is the ice one, and this is the price. So it appears to be working. Now, we need a few other things. So we need the image and the alt text for the image. And we also need the product. And from the product, the parent product of this variant, we're going to get the title and the featured image. The reason we are getting the featured image of the product is because if this variant doesn't have an image directly associated to it, we are going to default to the parent image. So let's grab all of this. Let's verify that this is working. So let me refresh this. And it appears to be getting all the data that I needed. So now, let's say that if query result the data, then set variant query result node, the data node. And now let's write a typing for this. So first, let's say interface variant data, title is a string, the price, the amount, even though it looks like a number, the API is returning a string, so we will set it that way. The currency code is a string. The image may not come, so let's put it as optional. It has a URL, which is a string. and it has alt text, which is a string. The product, which has a title that is also string, and the featured image of the product, which is also an optional. A product doesn't necessarily need to have an image. And then it has a URL and a string. So here now we can change this any type with variant data. And over here we can also indicate a type for the return of this query. So this gets a node, and inside that node is a variant data. Now this doesn't throw any error. And let's console.log over here, variant data. We see that first it is null as expected, and then we have all the data that our query returned. So what we will do is that if variant data is not defined or is null, let's return null, or basically let's not render anything. And if it is, then we're going to render this hello world. So if I refresh this, for a second you can see that there is nothing, and then once we get the data, we have this hello world. You can also just do JSON.stringify variant data to see it over there. Yes, you can see that all the data that we got is rendered over here. So now let's see how we can render a UI in here using the Shopify native elements. So let's do just that. Okay, so before getting there, I just wanted to mention that I got the name of all of these fields from the admin API. So this is the product variant resource in the admin API. And you can see here that it has a description of every field and what it returns and a short description of it. So if you need to grab some different fields from the variant or just a different resource altogether, like a collection or something like that, you can go to the admin API and look for it, and you can see all the fields that this query will return for that. So now that I mentioned this, let's start building the UI for our extension. Here I have the documentation for the different components. And now let's start by deleting this. And the first element that we will have is an inline layout. An inline layout is basically a way of having display flex over here because we cannot add CSS. We have to rely on the components that are already existing here. So this is basically having a div with display flex. Now let's have a checkbox. This is what we will use to indicate whether the variant item has been added to the cart or not. It got imported from the ROM package, so let me delete that. And now let's have an image. Did it get imported? Okay, let's have an image from this one. And the source will be variant data dot image and then URL. And if this doesn't exist, then variant data dot product dot featured image dot URL. For the alt text will be the same. So the name of the alt text here is accessibility description, and we will replace URL here for alt text. Likewise here. Now let's have a block stack, which is basically a way of having one component below the other, just like this example over here. And let's have a text that will have variant data, the product, the title, and then variant data, the title. So this will show the name of the product and then the name of the selected variant. And then below this, let's have the price. So variant data, the price, the amount, and then variant data, the price, the currency code. Now that we have this over here, let's see how this looks like. So this is what we currently have. You can see that it is not looking that good, but we will take care of that in a moment. Now let's have a state for controlling whether the item is selected or not. So is selected, set is selected, is state, this would be initially false. And the checkbox will be checked depending on whether this is selected or not. And now, to make this selectable, let's wrap all of this in a pressable component. So if the user clicks anywhere within this area, they will trigger the select of this item. So pressable, you can see it over here. This is basically a generic container that also lets us use it as a pressable area, as an area to trigger a click. So here, let's have onPress, set is selected, to is selected to the opposite of the current value. And now, let's see, this is working. And now let's start fixing the UI for this. So in our inline layout, the first thing that we want to do is that we want to have the alignment, the block alignment to center. That puts the checkbox in the middle, which I think looks better. Then let's have the spacing in between them be base and base. So this is the spacing in between the columns. Previously, they were not being spaced properly. Now it looks a bit better, but still you can see that this checkbox is taking way too much space. So what we can do to fix that is over here in columns, we have an array that indicates how much each column will be occupying. So there are 3 columns, the checkbox, the image, and this block stack. So the first column, the checkbox, we wanted to occupy auto, which means make it as big as it needs to be. Then the middle column, let's make it 80 pixels. And then the last one, let's make it filled, so it takes all the remaining space. If we take a look at this over here, I think this looks much better. Now we can add a few other parameters as well to make it look a bit better. Like for instance, let's change the padding. Let's make it base, so it is a bit larger. And now for the image, let's add a border radius of base, a border of base, and a border width of base. And what this does is that it will make it look like this image over here that has a border radius, although this one is a bit smaller, but it has, as you can see, that border color as well, and it makes it look a bit better. You may be wondering if we can change the background color of this pressable area. We can't, because Shopify doesn't let us do that. The way that this checkout works is that the merchant has the last word or the last saying of how it looks like. So if they wanted to use a different color, they are able to do so from the editor themselves. And as a result of that, we cannot really change colors for things like that. So if I look over here for color, you can see that there is not such a thing as a background color. I can change the opacity, but I cannot change the background color for any of this. As a matter of fact, I cannot even change the color of this border. This is just a default color that is consistent with all the other borders that you can see in this UI. So don't spend too much time trying to change that, because you probably don't have much luck with it. Now that we have the UI for this, let's add a title for that. So let's create a fragment. Let's add a heading. And let's say over here, other products you may like. Although we are currently only showing a single product. But that's fine. This is just an example. And the label is level 2. This level is what indicates which heading you use, H1, H2, and so on. But this is only visually. So the underlying HTML tag will remain the same for accessibility purposes. So Shopify will determine which one they will be using here. By changing the label, you are just changing how this looks like visually. So use whichever one you understand looks better for your use case. Now, let me set a block spacer over here, which is a way of saying setting a space in between components. It got imported from the wrong package. Always be vigilant of this because it happens often in VS Code. Now, let's set the spacing to be base. Let's see how this is looking. I think it's looking fairly well. And let's just add a divider at the top to create a clear division in between this section over here with the products in the cart and this section from our extension. And it may look like we also need to add a spacer over here. It doesn't seem to be saving. Being safe. All right, I added it above the spacer. It needed to be below it. Now it is. So this is basically the UI for our extension. Now let's make it work. So let's make it that whenever I click on this product is added to the cart and it shows over here and the price updates over here. And then if I click again, the product will be removed from the cart. So let's do that. What we will be doing for this last part is creating an effect. This one will trigger whenever isSelected changes. And now, if isSelected, this means that this just became true. So let's add the product to the cart. Otherwise, we'll have to remove it. So we'll have to make use of two hooks over here, use cart lines, and use apply cart lines changes. So the names are pretty self-descriptive, but basically, use cart lines will give us the names, the items that are in the cart at the moment. So let's do just that. Then apply cart line change will let us update the cart lines. So here we will be adding a product to the cart. So the type of this will be add cart line, a quantity of 1, and a merchandise ID of the variant ID. And then here, first we'll have to double check that the item is already in the cart because we need to get the cart line ID. So cart lines.find, and then cart line.merchandise.id is the same as variant ID. And we'll get the idea of this, which is optional because it isn't necessarily in the cart at the moment. If we found an ID, then we'll do apply cart line change. We will remove the cart line item. We have the ID over here and a quantity of 1. Now, let's see if this is working. So if I click on this, the item got added to the cart with the correct variant. If I click on this, then it gets deleted. You can see here also that the price is being updated, and any other elements in the UI that were dependent of it will also be updated. So if there was another extension that was doing something with the cart line items, that extension will have to be using this hook as well, which will tell that the cart line items just got updated, which is great. So now let's see how we can deploy this extension and then how we can let the merchants select a variant to show over here, because if you recall from the beginning of the video, we have this variant ID hard-coded over here, which is not ideal. Okay, so as this is just a development server, when we close this up, the checkout extension gets removed from the checkout in our store. So to make it permanent here, we have to create a deployment. So let's run npm run deploy. Let's release this as a new version. And now let's click over here. And now let's click on distribution, custom distribution, select custom distribution, And over here, we will paste the URL for our store. I will copy this, and I'll generate a link. Now, I will copy this link over here, and I'll go to my store, and I will install this. Now, with my checkout extension enabled, I'm able to go to settings, then to checkout, then to customize. For you to have this over here, you need to have checkout extensibility enabled. If you do, you'll see this customize over here. And then if I click on add a blog, you can see here my extension that we just created in the video. And this is showing as is over here. Now let's click on save. And this is working just fine. But now let's see how we can allow the merchant to, from this menu over here, select which product is showing over here. Okay, so now I'm in the settings for my extension. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to uncomment this. Now let's open this link of the documentation and let's see over here the different settings that we can have. You can see that we can have a Boolean, a date time, and a few others. But the one that we care about is variant reference. And you can see here in the example value how this looks like. And if you go to our code, you can see here that this is pretty much the same thing that we had over here. So the replacement of this hard-coded value for the actual data will be easy enough. So now, let me replace the type for variant reference. The key will be selected variant. The name will be selected variant. And I don't think we need a description for this. This is pretty self-explanatory. Now let's go to the code and update a few things to get this data from the settings. Okay, and the last step is to call this use settings hook to get the selected value from it. So let's say settings is equals to use settings, and variant ID now will be settings dot. Let's grab this key from here just like that. Let's say that this is a string because the return value of this is either a string, a number, or a Boolean. Let's also comment this previous INDB because we don't need it anymore. And now let's say that this will only be called if variant ID is defined. And likewise, if variant ID is falsy or undefined, let's just return null. Now let's run npm run deploy to see these changes. And let's go to the checkout. Let's go to customize over here. And if we change this, and we, for example, select this one, and I hit save, now if I refresh the page, you can see that the item here is the one that we selected over here. And I can add it to the cart. I can remove it by clicking this, and that's about it. So here you have it. This is how you create a checkout UI extension for Shopify. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave it in the comments below. Also, subscribe if you are not already subscribed, because I'll be uploading more videos like this in a near future. So see you guys in the next one.